So today's shiur, we are one day after Parshas CHUKAS 5777. It's the YAHRTZEIT today of the holy Rabbi Yekusiel Yehuda ben Tzvi Halberstam, the famed KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik v'Kodesh Levacha. And I had the zechus of spending this past Shabbos in Gaon'S. So, Motzei Shabbos on the way home, we stopped outside the cemetery just to say a kapitel tilim. So I feel obligated to share a couple of thoughts as an introduction to our shiur today. As promised, we are going to move into the world of the Maharal, a key figure that bridges from the era of the expulsion of Spain into the reemergence of life in Eretz Yisrael and in beginning in Eastern Europe, of course. But the segue that we're going to use is his input on the concept of the world of 10, which is remarkable. We've been talking about the connections, which are seemingly infinite connections between the items of 10 that are recorded in the beginning of Pirkei Avos, which was this past week's Pirkei Avos. So it's topical on that front as well. And we'll also look at it from the prism of the Parsha, particularly on the concept of the Be'er Miriam, the well of Miriam, versus the well of Moshe. But by introduction, the KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe was born right at the turn of the 20th century. He's a 20th century figure. He's a young man of 22. He already proven himself to be an Eloi. He was a great-grandson of the great Sanzarav, who was considered the foremost Gaon in that era. We're talking about going back into the 19th century. And a great and celebrated Hasidic dynasty. He was, at age 22, already married. The KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe was at age 22 already received smicha and was appointed the Rav of the city of Klausenberg. And that city was at the time already influenced by reform and a lot of the Yiddishkeit wasn't what it was. It certainly wasn't in the classic Hasidic framework. There was a lot of secular Zionism going about at the time. And that's what the youth and the young people were involved with. And he came in there by storm and set up a brand new Hasidic community. He became the Rav of a reorganized Hasidic shul, built Mosdos HaTorah, built yeshivot, and transformed the city of Klausenberg into I don't call it a hotbed of Hasidus, but a place where the greatest luminaries of the Hasidic world would come and feel at home. I would call it a beachhead. He established a beachhead of the greatest of the Hasidic dynasties would visit him. Of course, because of his great yichus and because of his charismatic personality. So he was a very young man when the Holocaust began. He was, at the time, in his 30s and 40s, he survived the Holocaust. How did he survive the Holocaust? He was really almost a superhuman being. He refused to eat anything that wasn't kosher. He refused to eat anything, chas v'shalom, that was chametz on Pesach. He basically didn't eat. He basically didn't sleep. And he conducted his life as if he never left his pulpit. Meaning he said Torah, even if nobody was listening on the Shabbos. Whoever was there could listen. And he performed the mitzvos with great intensity. His one focus in the concentration camp was, how do I do the mitzvos of Hashem? Period, end of story. That's what obsessed him, and that's what gave him the superhuman drive to survive, and of course inspire many others. To underscore this, the first Shabbos after liberation, they were liberated by the Americans. What did he ask from the Americans? He said, I want a car and a driver to go collect the bodies and give them a proper Jewish burial. That was the first thing he did. But actually, his very first Shabbos, which was very inspiring, he didn't have, he had the uniform of a concentration camp, like a pajama of the concentration camp survivors. He had wooden clogs. He didn't have a shtreimel, that's for sure. And he fashioned himself a shtreimel out of hats that they located in a Hitler Youth Club that was abandoned, and he fashioned himself a shtreimel from the hats of the Hitler Youth. He made himself tzitzis down to the last hour before Shabbos using the strings of the curtains that he was able to take off from the Hitler Youth building, and he gave about a 2-hour shiur or tish on Friday night. He spoke, and they davened for an hour and a half, Kabbalah Shabbos. In other words, it was as if nothing had happened. Or better yet, he kind of took off like a jet rocket the minute he was allowed to, and conducted a stirring Shabbos. And it went from there. It was a little bit after Pesach that they were liberated in the summertime. And then they were in a DP camp called Feldafing, which was a big DP camp. And they were already working with the Joint and the Hayas, which had more of a secular Zionist agenda. And he, of course, was not into that. And he would gather whatever kids he had or immigrants and say, we've got to build for them a Makom Torah. Later, he would do that in Williamsburg and Brooklyn until he made Aliyah in 1959 to build the Kiryat Sanz. Laniado Hospital and Kiryat Sanz. This is a remarkable koach. But he also immediately raised after the war $100,000 for the relief for the Jews in the German DP camps, where he set up yeshivas for girls, yeshivas for boys, svarim, dvarim shebekadusha, everything. And raising $100,000 in 1946, I don't know, how much is a 1946 dollar worth? Compared to today. So who knows what it was worth? $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, hard to know. But that was just by his force of his sheer energy and his Avas Yisrael and his determination to build. He had no questions about the Holocaust. He had no issues about the Holocaust. His wife said that her husband, of course, he lost his entire family during the war. They were taken to Auschwitz. He was selected by Mengele for work. He was later sent from Auschwitz to go take apart the remnants of the Warsaw Ghetto, because they wanted to take the last bricks and whatever they could. Can you imagine down to, it's like, the Nazis with the gold teeth. They had to take anything valuable that they could out of the Warsaw Ghetto and sell it to fuel their desire, their extermination machine, essentially. Okay, so on Yom Kippur of the first year after liberation, there was a very important visitor to the Feldafing camp, none other than General Dwight Eisenhower, who was the head of the Allied forces, the supreme commander of the Allied forces. Now, that was a big job, would you say? To be supreme commander of the Allied forces? Okay, that makes you about the most powerful man in the world, I would say, right? It means you have the combined armies of America, England, I don't know about France, but Australia, New Zealand, all the Anglo countries and their allies. He says it gets done. And the KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe, and the camp was preparing itself for a Kabbalah's Panim, let's say. Now, the secular Zionist leadership that had more influence than anybody else did not want the KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe to speak. But after the prisoners agitated, they said, no, the KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe has to speak. They said, okay, you can speak for a few minutes, but you can't wear a talis. You think the KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe listened? At a signal, he flashed a signal, somebody threw him a talis, he walked up and gave a 2-hour drasha. And at that time, there was Lieutenant Birnbaum, you might have heard of, a famous chaplain attached to the army that was involved in the rescue efforts after World War II. And he interpreted from Yiddish to English what the Rebbe was saying to Dwight David Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces. Quite an interesting, in some way, they were parallel, because he also was a Supreme Commander of the forces to reestablish and rebuild Torah. You could really look at it that way, ironically. And so afterwards, it says that Eisenhower was deeply moved. He shed a tear, whatever it was. He went afterwards through Lieutenant Birnbaum and said, tell the rabbi what can I do for you? I'm so moved. What can I do for you? Now, if Dwight David Eisenhower, chairman of whatever it's called, says to you, what can I do for you? What would you say? What would you say? Send a few $1 million, make me chief rabbi of the Allied forces and be able to direct, whatever. The Rebbe said, CHUKAS is coming, I want a lulav and esrog, so we can observe the mitzvah of lulav and esrog here in the camp. I don't have a lulav and esrog. Eisenhower sent a private plane to Italy where they still, the esrogim were in Italy. They found a lulav and an esrog, and sure enough, his request was fulfilled. I see that story as a metaphor for what got him through the war. He has a singular focus. I have to do mitzvahs now. What am I doing now? I'm not worrying about my fate. I'm not suffering. I'm not questioning God. You know what I mean? What I'm doing is I have to serve Hashem and do mitzvahs to the best of my ability. And that's the ringing message that he sent to everybody with that statement, and then he continued forward. In 1959, he made Aliyah after spending about 12 years in America, gathering money, and so on. And when he arrived, at that time, they left Idlewild Airport. Remember, before JFK, it was called Idlewild Airport. No, JFK. JFK became, because remember, he made Aliyah in 59, 3 years before Kennedy was shot. 4 years. So he landed on the tarmac, and he was already such a figure. He had a huge reception here in Eretz Yisrael. As did the Satmar Rebbe when he came for a visit, if you know a little bit of history. He had a remarkable reception here. Anyway, and somebody came off the plane and says, why are you here? It's like Israelis today tell Americans, why are you here? Are you nuts? We all want to be in New York. Why did you come here? And the answer that he gave, I think, is an answer appropriate for us. He says, throughout our history, many Jews, great Jews, have desired to live in the land of Israel. Like we spoke about the Ramban and the Bartenura, who was during the 15th century, reestablished Jewish life in Yerushalayim. He says, and I'm just one of those Jews. I'm just like one of those Jews who's coming to listen to Hashem's mitzvos and come and live in Eretz Yisrael. That's all. Just like he wanted his lulav and esrog, he wanted to live in Eretz Yisrael. And that's the reason you're here. That is the reason why we're here. To serve Hashem and to do Torah mitzvahs, which we cannot do as fully in Chutz La'aretz as we can here. Okay, and be closer to Hashem. The only reason to come is kosher. Anyway, a lot to talk about that. But what I will do is we'll dedicate this year in his memory, Elias Nishmaso, and the name of his farm is called Shefa Chaim. Shefa Chaim, which means source of life. And literally, that was him. He literally bestowed life among people. I will tell you just the story of my wife's family that we spent Shabbos with. My wife's grandfather, survivor of the Shoah, from Hungary, Romania, Carpathian, that area. You never knew when you woke up whether you were in Hungary or Romania or something else. The Nazis made that area from Romania into Hungary, and that's why at the end the Hungarians in 1944, allowed Eichmann to, attack the 1 million Hungarian Jews and deport the great majority of them to Auschwitz, all in the space of a few weeks. All in this period of the Sfiras HaOmer. It started on Pesach, or just before, and it went through the summer months by Shavuos. Most of them were dead. Just lightning quick. And it was that same team that was prepared to come to Eretz Yisrael, and they would have done a lot quicker work because there weren't 1 million Jews in Eretz Yisrael at the time. So I don't think it would have taken them 7 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. Anyway, so a survivor, my grandfather, my wife's grandfather, and he had a brother that also survived and came to Haifa. Lost his whole family, remarries in Haifa, has 2 sons. The sons were about 8 years old. We're talking about 1960. And through one of the Gabayim of the Rebbe gets in touch with them, and they know each other from the old country, from the Alter Haim, and says, come to Netanya. The Rebbe's building 150 apartments. There's going to be apartments here. There's going to be a community. Hamisher people, come live with us. And he did. So those two sons married, became KLAUSENBERGER Hasidim, kamuvan, right? And they each had 10 children. In the spirit of Hasidim, they each had 10 children, right? And those 10 children are all married now, and some of them have 13 children, some of them have 10 children. Basically, there are now hundreds and hundreds of descendants of this one Nitzol Shoah, right? And they're all over. They're in Beit Shemesh, Yerushalayim. So the one we stayed at, once a year gathers all the descendants, like at a Pnimiyah, like for Shabbos, and they have a Shabbos program. There are hundreds of them. All from one man. I said, that's Pshat Shefa Chaim. That the KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe, what if he didn't get in touch with him and schlep him to Sons? How many Jews wouldn't there be here? Who knows if those two sons would have even been from, right? Or who even stayed in the country, right? From Haifa? Okay, now today they're trying to make Haifa more of a religious town. Still, okay, Midbar, 70 years later, 60 years later. Okay, so let's therefore talk about Shefa Chaim. I need a chumash. Let's go into the parsha. To the concept of Shefa Chaim, we'll transfer to Be'er Miriam and Be'er Moshe. In this past week's parsha, we find that Miriam dies. My first question is, why did Miriam have to die? What did she do wrong? So that act of Lashon Hara that she did was 40 years earlier. Most of the Mefarshim learn that even though this story of the death of Miriam is told amidst the events of the second year, which was Meraglim, right, and Korach, that according to Rashi, in Muktam Lucha B'Torah, the parshiot are interchangeable pieces. It doesn't have to do with time, because truthfully, which came first, Meraglim or Korach? Korach came after Meraglim, right? And in between, they put the death of Miriam. But that didn't happen until 40 years later. Okay? Excuse me, they put in between, not the death of Miriam, the story of Miriam saying her piece, her Lashon Hara about Moshe Rabbeinu. And then in this past week's parsha, we find the story of Mei Meriva, right? Okay. So, most of the Mefarshim learn that not to look at the sequence of the events as they're recounted in the Torah itself, but as episodes. And the episode of Mei Meriva took place after Miriam dies, and what dries up immediately? The Be'er Mayim that they had. Now, why were Klal Yisrael, why did they merit having Miriam's Be'er for a full 40 years in the Midbar?
Because she saved Moshe.
She saved Moshe from the water. And she also stood by to see what would happen to Moshe. Now, also, what else did she do for Moshe afterwards that has to do with the idea of Shefa Chaim, if you want to think about it? The mother to do what? To nurse him. She brought the Shefa Chaim to Moshe Rabbeinu, correct? And what did she do to the Jewish babies? Which one was she, Shifra or Pua? Pua. She cooed the babies. She calmed them down. She spoke to them. She sang them lullabies. Whatever it was. But she was the one who brought the sense of comfort and security. And everything is okay. And you have everything you need. And everything's fine. And calm down. That was Miriam. However, that was not the be'er that they would drink prior to the entry with it to Eretz Yisrael. Because what happened at Mei Meriva? What happened at Mei Meriva? What does Moshe do? Hits the rock 2 times. With what? With the mata that we were talking about, right, last week. The mata of Aaron, which according to most is the same identical mata that Moshe did all the miracles with, which was now filled with flowers and shkedim. And I was thinking, what happened to the flowers? I mean, when he hit it twice, the poor flowers, what happened to the flowers? But in any case, so why did they take that mata? They were told by Hashem to take the mata and to speak to the stone. Now, what does that mean? There's endless perushim here. Abarbanel quotes 11 perushim. alone. The Aruch Chaim goes through all the Perushim and comes up with his own pshat. We're not here to go through that. But I will say a simple thing, which I think everybody will agree to. Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to speak to the rock, and there was going to be a Kiddush HaShem, which means what? The miracle was going to happen how? Through Dibur Ba'alma, only through words. Now, if you think back to Mitzrayim, did any of the Makos happen only with words? Did any of them happen only with words? No. It always either involved the Makkah, right, in some form, correct? Sometimes they took up and threw, like by Kinim, they threw up the ashes in the ground, they threw it up to the sky. It was always involving a hand, a mateh, the waving of a hand, whatever you want, but it always was involving the hand. And the extension of the hand, which is the mateh. Not so. This miracle was supposed to be words. Why? I mean, and in the end, it wasn't. In the end, he did hit, just like the good old days, with all those good makkos. And he says to them, Shimuna ha Morim. Sounds awfully like whose name? Shimuna ha Miriam. Shimuna, all you Miriam guys out there. Hamin hasela hazen otilachem mayim. You Miriamites. You babies. Bunch of babies. You need Miriam to say to you, poo poo. Poo poo. Don't you know that you're supposed to be more mature now? Would you believe that I can speak to this rock and bring water out of it? Well, they did try, according to Rashi, and it didn't work. Moshe, therefore, apparently concluded that they were not ready for that. And what does he do? Goes back to the old plan. And that's what he meant. You're only holding by the stage of Miriam. Be'er Miriam. But now we need a different type of Be'er. Because where are you guys heading? Where are you guys ready to go to after 40 years? Eretz Yisrael. We're about to begin a series of wars, milchamas, something that you have never seen in your 40 years. They did fight Amalek at the very beginning. That's true. But that was Yehoshua, and it wasn't a complete war. They only kind of beat back Amalek ve'achalosh Yeshua. You're now going to go through serious wars. How many malachim do they have to eventually conquer in Eretz Yisrael? Do you know how many? 31. 31 kings. That's 31 wars. A couple weeks ago, I was in Paris because they have cheap tickets I had to go to Montreal. Okay, so 6-hour layover in Paris. What am I going to do in Paris for 6 hours? Because you can learn Torah, of course. I say, no, as long as I'm here, let me go take a look. Call up Chabad, send me a driver. They have these drivers. They'll take you around the whole town in 2 hours.
Wow.
I say, it's easy. Pick you up at the airport, take you around for 2 hours, I'll take you back. He took me around, and we saw the Arc de Triomphe, and we saw the Eiffel Tower that they're putting a bubble on now. They're putting a bubble on the Eiffel Tower against terrorism, Nebuch. This, right? Strength of the West. Yeah, great strength. They have to cover it in tinfoil now, not tinfoil, in plastic bubble, so that they can't shoot. They can't shoot everybody there on the cable car going up. And the streets of Champs-Élysées. Now, the French are not modest people, to say the least.
Arrogant.
Edom has 3 parts, as Rabbi Mendel Kessin, one of my teachers, points out. He says there's the arrogance of Edom, there's the passions and taiva of Edom, right? And then there's the lies of Edom. So it said Russia took the gaiva and the pride. He says the Europeans took the lies. They're all liars. Oh, we love the Palestinians, we must save them, and all the money's going, right, to build monuments in Ramallah for terrorists and pay their families off. Chesed Lumim Chatas is a big fraud. The Europeans are a fraud, as Esav was a complete fraud. And then, of course, the Taivas is the, England and America together. And that's why all the things that brought down the level of morality in America started off in England. You know that. Like the Beatles. No one ever saw anybody with long hair down to here. And what did he unleash in the youth of what did they unleash in the youth of America for the greatness? The kids went crazy, went absolutely nuts. Girls were fainting and drying and screaming. They had crowd. What's going on? He released a world of passion and taiva. That was their gift. It's a powerful force. It hasn't stopped. Hasn't stopped. It's holech v'gover. It's going only bigger and bigger and bigger. Never stopped from there. Hit the ground running, moved on from there. So it's a fraud. And you go under the Arc de Triomphe, you will see, when you look up, it's like 100 feet high or more. You see the names of all the battles. Every place, I guess it's for Napoleon, I imagine, every place that they conquered, every town, every little village showed their pride. That's who we beat. It's a remarkable thing. And there's a really good kosher restaurant there. Dairy. He took me there. It's called Tibbs. I'll give it a plug because they serve tuna shawarma in a sandwich. The best thing I ever had. Maybe because I was in Paris and I was hungry. But there is a sense of war, who we are. We're great, whether you're great or not. We are great. And the Jewish people had no exposure to that or that type of enemy. But now they're going to. And you're going to need something other than Moshe's mate and Miriam's poo-pooing to run back to. Not going to help you very much anymore. That's the transition. What does that mean? So if you look, somebody gave me a Torah. I mean a Chumash. This is a Chumash. Oh, it has the Yalkut Shimoni. No, this is just Yalkut Shimoni. It doesn't have Chumash in it.
Who said this about memory of being murdered?
It's brought down in a number of Svarim, in the Chassidish Svarim. Yeah, that they suggest Shimon. Oh, Reb Nachman says it. Reb Nachman says it. Meaning, he's saying to them, you're not ready for my be'er. But the truth is that they were. And Moshe erred in that. Because it says, Vayavo kol ha'eda, the entire nation came, meaning everybody from the generation of the Midbar was already dead. And this generation, they called themselves Hashem. They were ready. And in fact, it explains an interesting question. After Moshe hits the rocks, the water comes out. What did the people do? What did the people do? They sang a shira. Now, let me ask you a question. Shira means you're pretty happy, right? But what just happened to them? What just happened at Mei Meriva? What just happened 2 seconds ago? Moshe and Aaron got the death sentence that they're not going into Eretz Yisrael. Is that a happy time? What kind of time? What kind of time is that for a shira? They should be in Avelus. They should be doing tshuva, pleading that Moshe and Aaron should take them. Right? Nope. They sing a shira. How do you understand that? Because the generation of Miriam was coming to an end. And Miriam represented the previous generation that they were nurtured, right? From the time that they were in Egypt, literally, by Shifra and Puah, and raised up and taken out by Moshe and Aaron, the brothers of Miriam. And by the way, if there is no Miriam, there's no Moshe and there's no Aaron. Correct? Really, because what was the point of, if there's no Moshe, then there's no point of Aaron as his spokesman and his helper and the Kohen Gadol, right? Aaron has no position without Moshe, as he's only as Moshe's assistant, as his Sagan. Okay? So now, I'd like to suggest the following, and we're going to look at that. We'll look at that song in a second. The concept is as follows. Miriam brought what? What do we know about Miriam? What was the be'er? What was the type of Torah, let's say, that Miriam taught? Because the be'er, according to all Mefarshim, was a reference to Torah. Okay? And even you could say, it says in Dvarim, Ho Moshe Be'er es divrei Torah azos. Moshe explained the Torah in 70 languages. Be'er, the wellspring of knowledge. Be'er means the wellspring of knowledge. And all the Meforshim here, our Chaim HaKadosh in particular, says they sang a shira not because they had water, but because they had a wellspring of Torah that they now inherited in a way that they hadn't before. They may not have had Moshe anymore, but they had the Torah's Moshe. And in essence, that was a more valuable thing. Why was it more valuable? Because that would stay with Bnei Yisrael, La'olam Voed. Moshe will come back with Mashiach as part of Mashiach, but the Torah will stay with Am Yisrael throughout its journey completely. And in fact, how did the Jewish people cross the Yarden? How did they get across the Yarden? What's the story of them crossing the Yarden? They were carrying the Aron Kodesh, right? Or was the Aron Kodesh carrying them? Because we say, Aron no say es, no sav. They floated across the Yarden. Holding on to what? Holding on to the Luchos. And what was in that Aron? What was put inside that Aron? The mateh with the flowers and the oimer was in there to say, you want your mateh? You want your omer? You better hold on to this. It's the Shefa Chaim. It's the Eitz Chaim Himacham Ba. Nothing is going to help you encounter those wars with the 31 kings of Canaan except Be'er Moshe. The Torah, the deep well. The well means the well springs of life. The well springs of life and success and Shefa and Parnasa will come to you through Torah. Eitz Chaim Hi Lamachazikim Ba. Much like we go back to the KLAUSENBERGER Rebbe. Look how, just in the story of my family, the Shefa Chaim. It tells one Jew to come live in Kiryat Sanz, and out of that comes a few hundred God-fearing, and they're with it people also, One girl's going to be a nurse because they have a hospital, they're training nurses. That's not so typical in the Haredi community. One is doing smart houses. Her husband is doing smart houses. That's pretty good. They're not fashlufen. They're alive. They're taking on their life. I don't know. How do they support all these people? How do they make weddings for all these people? How is this done? There is no logical explanation. You hold on, follow the Rebbe, just follow, and you'll be okay. You let go, we don't know what's going to happen.
Just explain what smart houses are.
Oh, smart houses are, everything's automated. You talk to your phone. You say, hello. They have these messengers on the phone now. Could you lower my air conditioning? Could you turn out the lights? Could you turn up the heat or turn down the heat? Oh, this is where things already are. I'm not saying, this is, we got to get with the program. The baby boom generation is way, way out of touch. They still remember black and white televisions and, and the reel-to-reels. Forget that. You're gonna talk and things are gonna happen. That's what Moshe was teaching them. Right now you're gonna have a different technology. The technology of Shira. And Torah is Shira. Kisfuli es ha Shira hazos. Torah is called Shira. It's words of praise. Because as we've learned, it's all the names of Hashem.